And Jeff Sanders. Andy. You just can't see it. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Natalie Boland. Nice to meet you.
Wow, wow. Why don't we get some height in the family? Good thing.
I know.
Right. I need to get my nieces, well, actually, one of my nieces has them. Well, so did my niece, so there you go. That's great. What's that? No. Yeah, someone. Everyone's good. My mom's picking up Barbie cigarette. Got a little bit. And he lives there.
You live there?
Well, they actually spend more time here in Valor. Little picture of her. Yeah, great guy. He's actually from what's great. Where is it? They were running. He was there with his wife. His wife actually yeah, so he grew up, I think from like high school. So they've known each other. But it's I don't know. Are you still with them or guy I work with, he probably is actually. So are you? Hi, how are you? Yeah. From Russia.
I
Really did it.
I don't know you were there. Right, me neither. I don't know either.
You don't sound like you just got over. High school. What? Oh. Road call, but he's got.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The phone's getting small. Unlimited.
Yeah. Here.
I am so
I didn't.
Yes, exactly.
You're kind of your.
Just to let you know. Yes, thank you.
Sure. We did. I really can't see it.
We're just thinking.
Here, I'll sit on that.
Yes.
So you miss it?
Yeah, yeah. From where it started, the wind would blow away from it.
Yeah, it just went east and you were back.
Yeah. Right.
A couple more days. Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, I didn't see the other hand.
Yeah.
You look so much like David.
That's what you saw in the last night. Yeah, that's one. So I guess every time, I mean, it's like.
We're happy our plans with that.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I did. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Yeah, but I guess. I'm not- Call me.
Block.
Yeah, so they're still living. Figure that for a while. Just right.
Oh, yeah. Just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phone.
לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת לטעת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לרוק ועת לרפות, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רכות. Ecclesiastes in our Bible teaches us that there is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking. We're here this morning to hold and to weep with and to laugh with and to embrace this family who has suffered a loss, a tear in the very fabric of their lives. We're here to remember Barbara and all the joy that she brought for so many years to everyone who is sitting right in front of us. We're here to remember the values that she lived and the way that she passed those on from one generation to another generation. When we gather together, we use our ancient words to help us create a holy space so that we can all be here to support and love and comfort those who need us. Throughout the morning, we will also take some time to listen to the memories of who she was, the stories that make us smile, the stories that make us cry, the stories that we will tell for years and years and years. In the Jewish tradition, we use the idea of eulogizing, of telling the story of someone's life to lift them up, to help their memory stay with us, stronger and brighter and lighter, so that we know that the way that they lived will shape how we live for many years to come. And so we begin with words of prayer, with teachings that have brought comfort for many, many years. Particularly in this moment, we look to the words of the 23rd Psalm. And in the 23rd Psalm, our sages teach us that not only does this psalm talk of comfort and peace, but it also talks about what does it mean to have someone walk beside you in very dark moments. And we know that at this time, it feels like we are in the bottom. But together, we will walk through this valley, the valley of the deep, the valley of death, and we will support each other and ensure that as we do, we hold Barbara's memory forever in our minds. And so we begin with the words of the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino dasha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yanaleni, nafshi yeshoveh. Yanechini v'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, Hema yanachamuni, ta'aruch lefanai, shulchan neged sorai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirnefuni, Kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim. Psalm 23. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name, and even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Our angels spend much of their time sleeping. In their dreams, they tear down the new houses by the sea and build old ones in their place. No matter how long they may sleep, 100 years, 200 years, 10 centuries is not too much. The first to wake up takes the torch that has been handed down, adds a drop of oil to the lamp, blesses the eternal light, and then recalls the name of every other angel. And one by one, as they are remembered, they wake up. For them, as for us, there is nothing more beautiful than memory. And so to help us remember Barbara, we are going to be calling members of the family to come and speak. Now, as many of you know, unfortunately, Steve could not be here today to stand with Amy and to help her speak this morning. He is unfortunately injured and in the hospital. He's okay and will be fine. It might be a long road, but we know that we feel his presence here, and we know that he really desperately wanted to be standing by your side, Amy, here to help you. And so as we have each member of the family speak this morning, Lisa will speak, followed by David. And then Amy will come stand with me and we will read a prayer together. And then Josh will come and represent the grandchildren. So, Lisa.
Hello there. I'm Lisa Bach, Barbie's youngest daughter, the baby of the family. We would like to thank you all for being here today in person or virtually. People live on through photos and the stories that are told about them. I have actual snapshots of our mom over her lifetime, thousands of them, but I also have those little moments and stories that are snapshots of her life and our lives together. Today, I'd like to share a few bigger picture snapshots to give you a portrait of our mom, Barbara Bach. First, loss. Losing one's mother at any age is monumental. It leaves an indelible imprint. My mom lost her mother, Dorothy, when she was only 13 years old. That altered her life in every way possible. It shaped who she was to her very core. So I know how lucky I was to have had her as my mom for 53 years, almost to the day. Undying love. My dad loved my mom with his whole being. I've never seen anything like it. He treated her like a princess and loved her until the day he died. My mom, even in her dementia, fiercely loved my father. She unfailingly asked about him every day, wanting to be with him. She did not forget that love, and it brings me comfort to think that they are now together again. My hands. I look down and see her hands. I genuinely love hearing so many people say that we looked so much alike. Huge compliment. My mom was one of the most stunning women I've known. She was always dressed in beautiful clothing, her hair coiffed, her nails done, impeccable. Which leads me to style. This is one of the more vexing memories for me, as the one question she asked me the most throughout my life, besides, where do you want to eat, was, are you wearing that? I'll admit it, since I was young, I chose comfort over fashion, granimals over gunny sacks. So I'm not the most stylish, but mom always tried to help me in her mom way. She would send me and her other children and grandchildren clothes for almost every occasion. She mostly hit it out of the park, but there were a few doozies. To really understand the extent of her love of shopping, I would come home for a visit in Maryland, and we would walk into Nordstrom, and the sales associate would say, "Hi, Barbie," and then turn to me and ask, "Are you the daughter in Colorado or California?" They knew her well, very well. Adventures. She and my dad went on drives every weekend together, all around the Maryland, DC area. They were, they'd come to trips here in Colorado, they'd come out to California, they went elsewhere in the world, Paris, Russia, Mexico, Hawaii. One of my favorite trips, which I went on with them, was our delicious tour of the United Kingdom, where I played chauffeur and schlepper. My mom knew how to pack a really big bag. Food. It must be genetics, as she certainly passed this love on to her kids and grandkids. She was a great cook, always making sure to have dinner on the table for us growing up, even though she worked full-time. Sour cream chicken, stuffed green peppers, chicken and rice, but her matzo ball soup was legendary, as was her love of donuts. Mom often would be caught with a light dusting of jelly donut powdered sugar on her chest. It's a good look. It's a good look. I know personally. Caretaker. Mom was a caretaker. She was our family's biggest champion. She did everything she could to make sure that we were all living our best lives, carving out our educational paths, acting as a sounding board for life's decisions. She was always there to listen, suggest, and support. Here, I also just want to quickly acknowledge my sister Amy, who also is an amazing caretaker. Thank you, Amy, for your huge heart and for caring for our mom over the last 4 years while she lived here in Denver. That was no easy task. Dementia is cruel, as is COVID. Whether seeing mom multiple times a week through a window or sitting with her at lunch or at a rousing round of bingo, there was a dime to be won, so you were there. You were there for her. Thank you, Amy, for all you did to make sure that mom was safe, loved, and always had activities and seasonal decorations in her room, even that little scary elf. And one more, unconditional love. I knew that my mom loved me. That's a true gift. She loved all of her children, including Laura, Steve, and Karen, and of course, her grandchildren, an abundance of love for them. But over the past few years, she wasn't capable of telling me she loved me daily like she always had. But even though she couldn't necessarily say it, I could feel it. We would just look at each other, and I knew her love was always that strong, and the feeling was mutual.
I'm Dave Bach. I think most people know me in here. And what I wanted to do is just tell little vignettes about my mother. I think Lisa did obviously a great job of explaining who she was. But one of the things, I think it's a Jewish thing, not that everybody else doesn't do it, but humor is such an important part of our lives. And in our family, that was what we do. And everything had humor to it, no matter what we did. It was uplifting. We all knew how to tell a joke. We all knew how to appreciate the humor in everything that had humor in it. And most of what I have to say is sort of that. And I've got a list of them. I'll try and not make them big stories. But one of the ones that's going to resonate with my immediate family is my father's spaghetti, if you believe it or not. And I don't know if I can say this, and it's a Jewish building, but it had sausage and meatballs and all kinds of stuff, and a very healthy helping of sugar. But whenever we got together, especially, well, when the grandkids were all together and when the family was together, my father would make, it was a big deal, whether we're in Vail, whether in Colorado, whether in Maryland, he would make a big thing of spaghetti and everybody loved it. But we didn't find out till later that my mom would like sneak into the kitchen when no one was looking and like put other spices and seasonings in it. And it was funny, right? It's funny. So we actually loved my mother's cooking and we gave my dad the accolades for making it. One of the things I remember about my mom, and it was really important, she liked to be at every event. She's even here. She liked to be at every event that we had involving the kids, involving us. I was a musician, I still am. And even when I was a little kid, every, I don't know, high school lunchroom I played at, every party, whatever, my mom wanted to be there, my dad also. And it didn't change with my kids. Noah is a string bass player, piano player, just about everything really. Brilliant musician, frankly. Noah played the tuba. I think that's sort of like a bass. I'm a bass player. And my parents, my mom in particular, would be at every recital. I'm not kidding. Every single thing she wanted to be at. And it was really wonderful. And the funny thing about my mom, and I have to do this, is she couldn't really dance or anything. She had no sense of rhythm. But if you played music around her, this is what she'd do. She'd get really... And it's just a funny memory because I'll never forget. She couldn't sing. But when my parents got married, my dad used to teach dancing in the Catskills when he was a kid. He was, one of those guys, and, they'd have this guy go dance with the girls and things like that. But it was very important. My father, in fact, he taught. But before they got married, my dad wanted to have, the first dance. Obviously with my mom, and he took her to a dance studio and actually taught her to dance. And that's how they did their first dance. And when it was over, that was it. I don't know how much she danced after that. But it's a good Bach story. So when my kids play, Aaron wrestled, Noah played a little bit of baseball, Aaron played baseball. It was a big sport for him. My parents were at every game. If they could get there, they weren't out of town, they were there. And that's really what my parents were like. And it was great. It was great that they really wanted to be at everything. My mom worked in my office as a legal assistant for about 5 years. And she made friends with just about everybody that worked with her. And Erlene and Deborah and Leslie became friends of hers. And when it came to Erlene and Deborah, they would go out to lunch all the time. And when my mom stopped working for me, they would still go out to lunch. And that's just sort of who she is. Of course, food was involved, but that's who she was. She really liked to make friends and have friends. And that was important to her. One of the interesting things that happened to us when we grew up, and we probably needed a little therapy after this, but we took a trip to Canada in a trailer home, like a Winnebago thing. And I still don't think we've all gotten over it exactly. But my dad had never driven one of these things. And he just, he was very romantic. I mean, if you knew him, he wanted to live in Alaska. Anything like He-Man, that was what my dad wanted to do. Of course, he was a Marine. But we had this Winnebago. We had a little bit of an incline on our driveway. And none of us had ever been in anything like this before. And I was probably 12 or something. So we packed the Winnebago up with all the food, all the clothing, salt and pepper, all this stuff, put it all in all the cabinets, shut all the cabinets. This is such a Bach story. So my dad backs this Winnebago thing out of the driveway and turns it, and all that stuff came flooding out all over the place. And, we don't know. And you're supposed to latch those things, and I'd never been in one. And I know my dad hadn't been in one of those before. So the trip went downhill from there. It really did. It's unbelievable what happened to us. And we don't have time for all the stories, but my dad's back went out. Lisa reminded me of this last night. My dad's back went out when we were on our trip in Canada. Probably, let's just assume it's the furthest point away from our home any of us had ever been. And his back went out. And my mother, people who know my mother really well, she had to drive this thing back from Canada herself. You can imagine what was going on in our Winnebago. But here we are. We made it. One of the things that I really loved about my mom, and I've asked my kids about this, and I don't know about Amy's kids, but I have a huge Yiddish vocabulary. Other than Tochasav on Tish, I don't think I have a sentence I can really say. But it's amazing how many times something happens. And the first thing that comes to my mind is a Yiddish word. And they come from somewhere. They just pop up as part of my vocabulary. And it's just fun because that came from my mother. That really did. And yeah, it's just funny how, Spilkus, anything, it's funny. And then you have to explain it, right? Depends where you are. The other thing that it was really important to me growing up is I've got learning disability and not always the most organized person. And my mother typed out, remember typewriters? I guess that dates me, I'm not that old, but she typed all my college applications. I just kept messing it up. And I probably wouldn't have gotten into college had it not been for her typing these things. I remember I sat on my bed. I remember that, just sat on my bed and she would ask me the questions and she would type it out. And it was just great. And one of the other things she did that was also life-changing for me really is she encouraged me to go to law school. I went to school in Boulder and I was a biology major. And what I really wanted to do was be a pediatrician. And like in the middle of my second year of college, it was just it wasn't a good fit for me. So I changed my major to classical history. So I've got a classical history major with a little biology and Latin, classical Latin and classical Greek. And when I made the change, I'm on the phone with my parents. I'm glad I was far away. I'm like, well, I've changed my major from biology. I was going to be a doctor and now I'm going to be teaching private school because I'm going to switch to classical history with a minor in Latin. My dad gets on the phone. He's like, we didn't send you to college to pursue a hobby. And I'm like, I think you did. And I loved it. And in my retirement, I'd like to go back and relearn the Latin. Another thing, and Lisa said this too, is I don't know whether it's genetic, but clothing is really important to me. I don't know if you can see. It's really important to me. And that came from my mother. And she was always well dressed. And when I was in college, even law school, she would send clothing. And I had a roommate of mine when I was in Boulder. And I wasn't helping clean up the apartment as much as he would have liked. I didn't know we even had a vacuum cleaner. I didn't. He pulled it out of the closet. He's like, you don't even ever vacuum. And then he said to me, he's like, I didn't grow up like you did. My mother has never sent me a box of clothing from Lord & Taylor. I'm probably got 10 of those while we lived together. Yeah, it's funny. It's really funny. So she gave me a love of clothing, but not of shopping. She loved to try every new restaurant, whatever came up. She loved going. My dad loved going, and there was always a review. So that's another thing I love. I love ethnic food. We raised our kids going to, whether it was Ethiopian or Argentinian or whatever, and we still love that. And Aaron, it's really nice. He has a girlfriend. And that's one of the things he likes to do is to take her to all these different, Afghan restaurants. It's great. It's just something we do and it's part of our family history. And I get that from my folks. When I was a little kid, I had horrible asthma. Everything made me sneeze. I carried in my sock. I always carried my little inhaler. And it took me years to get, not keep doing like this to make sure it was there. But whenever I had allergies at night, if I couldn't sleep, and it happened a lot, she would rub my back. And that's kind of a bonding thing that I have with my mother. I didn't really think of it much as an adult, but thinking of things to talk about, remember about my mom. That was one of them, an hour to get me to go to sleep because I was like that mouth breather guy. I needed the help to get to sleep. I couldn't sleep. The other thing that she was really good at was if you got a stain on your clothing, usually a food stain from somewhere, she could get it out. She had and my wife called her the stain whisperer because she was anything. I mean, strangers, you're like, you got a little something here. I can get that out. When I was a little kid, like I said, I'm a musician. I have a really big love of music. I was 13, 14 years old. She and my dad would take me and my friends. She'd pick us all up, take us to what was called the Capitol Center at the time. And I would see Foghat, Eric Clapton, I don't know, the Outlaws, Bad Company, all these people. They would drive us probably half an hour, 40 minutes away, drop us off, go home. Thing was over at 11:30, drive back out, pick us up, and then drop everybody off. And I'll never forget that. That was really important to me. And, to be a little kid who was interested in music and to see Kiss, right? I mean, it was just amazing. I worked when I was in junior high school at a deli. I worked at a pizza place. And my mom and dad also always took me back and forth to work. And that's something I'll never forget. It was really important to me. None of my other friends worked. I just like doing it. I like the company. I like being around the big kids. Another thing that happens, very funny story. While my mom was working in my office, one of our suite mates he became a judge, and we all knew him really, really well. And he actually ended up running the courthouse in my town, but he was a criminal defense attorney is what he did at the time. And my mom got a speeding ticket. She was the receptionist and Bob had an office. And she came in and said, "Oh, Gervalt, I got the speeding ticket. I never get a speeding ticket. And what am I going to do?" And so Bob volunteered to go to court with her to defend her against, I don't know, she was going like 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, whatever it was. So she had like a heavy hitter lawyer. I mean, I'm sure the judge was like, "What are you doing here?" Right? Because they call the tickets at the same time. So, and he's like 8 feet tall, so you can't miss him. So before they're leaving the office, Bob says to my mom, he's like, "Did you pack a suitcase?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, I don't always win." Yeah, it was hysterical. And my mom was worried. She was really worried. So the one other thing I want to mention, and this is also very, very Barbara Bach, is she kept an impeccably clean house. I mean, it was unbelievable. And she was constantly doing this. Right? And she would come near. In fact, I think I saw some. She would do this wherever she was. She'd come to your house. She wouldn't go in your medicine chest, but boy, she'd make sure it was clean. And Lisa told the story of she came over to her house and went into her bathroom, I guess, and then came out and said, "You really got to clean the top of the mirror." I mean, it's just so funny. And that was my mom. She was great. We loved humor in our house. We're all, I'm going to brag, we're all really funny. And it's from the practice we got growing up. And again, I think it's a Jewish thing. Not that other people aren't funny, but it's just something that I just see and I feel, and it's just great. It's just great. So I wanted to be a little more entertaining than sad. And thanks for all listening. And I got to do it.
Jeff, do you want to come up? So Amy has asked me to read this beautiful piece that she wrote, which is a little bit of a reflection about her mom, but also a poem that she would say to her mom. Oh, you ready? Yeah. Okay. My mom had an incredible life, and everyone who spoke before me has summed up how she touched their life for the better. I would like to add to those memories with a few of my own. First, I want to say how devoted to my success she was. One of the most incredible things she ever did was help me with my college admission letters and handwrite my wedding invitations. She was a phenomenal writer and had some of the most beautiful handwriting. She was so caring towards us kids, her grandchildren, and her late husband, Bill, my dad. She cared, and that's the thing I'm going to miss most. She was my best friend. We would talk daily about her grandkids, other times about Roscoe and Steve. I like that those are the same. She would call and tell me about shows I needed to watch or movies I needed to go see. We would tell each other stories from our week, share some laughs, and give each other advice. When my dad passed away, her health took a turn for the worse and things changed. Over the last few years, she wasn't able to communicate as well because of her dementia, but we remained as close as ever. I'm going to miss our daily conversations, but I'm so grateful that I got so much time with my mom. To close, I want to share something that I wrote and hung in my mom's room. We would read it together almost every day. I believed reading this together helped turn some of her bad days into good ones. I'd like to read it to you all now. Your smile can light 1,000 hearts. Your laughter is contagious. Your love is gracious and never ending. You are my rock, my anchor, and my shining star. It's an honor to follow in your footsteps to become all I can be, because I have you, Mom, in my life to guide me and give me hugs and kisses. You are the love of my life. Thank you, Mom, for all you do. The world is a better place because you are my best mom in the world. Thank you for always being there for me. I love you to the moon and back. And now Josh is going to come and represent the grandchildren.
It's great seeing everyone out there today and over Zoom. Thank you for coming. My name is Josh Fullen. My parents are Amy and Steve, and I am Grammy's oldest grandson. I was asked to represent the other grandkids, Jake, Danny, and Jess, Noah, and Aaron. We're all heartbroken over her passing, but are grateful that she passed peacefully. For the last few years, her health has suffered, and I'm glad that she doesn't need to suffer anymore. But rather than focusing on that, we thought we would share some times from before she got ill. A ubiquitous experience we all shared and some of our favorite memories from when we were kids was sleeping over at Grammy and Poppy's house. They would let us stay up too late watching TV, and we loved listening to Poppy's amazing stories while Grammy would stand over his shoulder and shake her head. And of course, we would all eat all of her amazing food. It's funny, she had staples of food, and like they've already been mentioned, there's no collusion. We all talked as grandkids, and we mentioned her stuffed bell peppers, brisket, sour cream chicken, and matzo ball soup. That was something that was like her staple. We're gonna miss that. Nobody left her apartment hungry, especially after she insisted on a second or third plate. Every dish she made was with love, and we're all going to miss that love. Grammy loved us as much as she loved supporting us. She went to every single one of Noah's orchestral concerts and Aaron's baseball games. Every time Aaron stepped up to bat, Grammy was right there to watch him knock it out of the park. The lane she would go to support her grandkids weren't just confined to Maryland. She also flew out with Poppy for every one of Jesse's dance recitals. With one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding a Diet Coke, she would drive Jake and me to football practice and give us some coaching tips. And then when she got tired of driving us around, she would let Danny drive under the guise that she was teaching him. Each of us had special memories with Grammy, and we're going to cherish those forever. Last night, we stayed up late reading handwritten letters that she wrote to each of us when we were younger. It was funny when we got them, we couldn't always read her handwriting because it was in cursive, and she sort of had this like exquisite talent. So our parents would usually read them to us. Her handwriting was recognizable and something she was well known for. It's funny, she addressed the envelopes for Aaron and Noah's bar mitzvah, handwritten those, for Aunt Lisa's bar mitzvah as well. And then my mom's wedding invitations, which she wrote about. She was extraordinarily caring. And that's one more thing that we're going to miss. So she was an amazing grandmother, and we're going to miss her. So we love you, Grammy. Thank you.
Just wanted to say that sometimes at a funeral service at this moment, I come and I have to remind the congregation and the family that even though we are sad, it's okay to laugh and share memories that are funny. But I think we're okay in this room with that moment. You know, I have not had the pleasure of knowing your family quite as long as some of the people who sit here today. But from just the past few days where we've had a chance to share stories and connect with one another, it has been so beautiful to watch the way each of you, and particularly Lisa and David and Amy, the three of you, have taken what you know to be the great gifts of Barbara's life and reflected on how they make each of you better people individually and help you carry on the absolute love and strength of what it means to build cohesive family, which was clearly the core of who she was. And yes, she was also very smart and had a tremendous work ethic and carried and lifted your family professionally and financially through a lot of moments when it was necessary. And to watch each of you need to lift up the other in this moment, need to make sure that I knew, and that therefore everyone here knew, how much the other sibling needed to be recognized and needed to be cared for as important in your mom's life. That is a beautiful gift that she has given you on what does it mean to love and connect with your family. There is a teaching in the Talmud that talks about how our lives become like trees. And it says that the accomplishments of the many children and grandchildren, in this case in particular, are the branches and the leaves of the tree. And they are what we see. And they are what we celebrate. And they are beautiful. But the home and the parents in the home are the roots of that tree. They form the foundation. They nourish the branches. And without being strong and firmly planted, the tree would not flourish. And that to me represents who she was in her life, that she created this strong foundation that each of you now take forward with you and use in your lives, with each other, with your own families, and as you continue to hold her gifts as you move forward. The Jewish tradition holds up this idea of an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. And that can sound trite sometimes, but when you read what that tradition actually means, by what does it mean to be a woman of valor, It is everything that you have said about who she was and how she lived her life. A mother of generations. She is precious in the gifts that she has given to her family. Her children have found trust and truth in these gifts. They follow in the patterns that she taught. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teachings of kindness is on her tongue. Her children benefit and learn from her wisdom. And so we say, may she always be credited for the fruit of her labor and her own achievements. And may she live on in our memories in glory. And together we all say, Amen. So at this time, I'm going to ask that we all rise as we are able, as we say the words of the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Mamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina. Im kedushim udorim, kezohar harakia mazhirim. Et nishmat yakireinu shehalecha leolama. Barachamim, Yastirea beseder kenafav leolamim. Veitror mitror hachaim et nishmata Adonai. B'tanuach b'shalom al mishkeva v'nomar amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our loved one who has entered eternity, grant her clear and certain rest with you, Adonai, in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold her in the embrace of your wings. Secure her soul in eternity. Adonai, she is yours. May she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. In just a moment, we will conclude our service here and move to the cemetery for our burial. I'm going to ask nicely that while many of us would like to spend time sharing and laughing with the family, that you let them get to their cars so that we can get to the cemetery in a timely fashion. There will be other moments to share. And so we say as we close, may the Holy One of blessing, from whom all things come and to whom all things return, give us light and peace on this day of grief and mourning. And may our service of memory for our beloved Barbara bring us comfort and strength. And together we say, Amen. There is not a formally escorted procession, so everyone please obey traffic
laws and drive safely. I have directions and the address printed over by the register before you signed in. We'll ask everyone to remain in their seats momentarily while we have the pallbearers meet us back at the doors and we escort the casket to the coach. אני אקרא מלאכו. משכן בהר קדשך. זה תמיד מפעל there. And that's the level. לא רגל על שנו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה. לא עשה על דבר. ניסה בעיניו, נמאס, ואין החיים, בא להרע ולא ימות. אז כל הזמן נשתה, לא פעל מהקילו.